Hello, my friends. I'm happy to be speaking with you. We're coming into Easter, and for us as Christians, this is a great time because we are an Easter people, a people of hope and resurrection. And as Catholics, I think this is a wonderful time in our faith family. At Easter time, and it's good to ask ourselves, why do some people feel so at home in our Catholic faith, and why are some people not feeling at home? This is a reality that you and I need to look at and examine for Jesus, because he wants all of us living out our lives with the sacramental graces and in the protective pasture of the church. This is what he wants for us. And so we ask ourselves, well, I began to contemplate this, and I thought back to when I was a child and some of the messages that I got. Now, if you're like me, and like everybody else, you were imperfectly formed. The formation was good, and it did us, but could have been better too. I remember being told that if I missed Mass on a Sunday, it was a mortal sin, and I would sadly go to hell unless I was able to get to confession before being hit by a bus or whatever. Now, these things are funny to me now, in as much as they're ridiculous, and for some, not so ridiculous. When people were enculturated this way, and when the formation didn't advance with the age and the development of a person, they may have gone on to commit more serious sins than missing Sunday Mass, and thought to themselves that being a Catholic and being part of the Catholic Church was perilous, because one false move and you were, there was no hope for you. So now we all advance and we consider mortal sin. Let's think about it now. In the past, the teaching kind of went like X equals mortal sin. Okay, now we advance into the truth, which is that the Catechism teaches that a little more completely. And so for us too, we must come to understand mortal sin. For sin to be mortal, according to our Catechism, 3 conditions must be met together. Mortal sin is a sin whose object is grave matter, quite serious, and which is also committed with full knowledge and deliberate consent. Now, full knowledge and deliberate consent. And although you and I can judge, according to the Catechism, that an action is a grave matter, we must leave all judgment to God. Only God can know. When we say things like full knowledge and deliberate consent, we're getting into territory of, you better not, if you're drunk, let's say when you committed a grave action, if you're experiencing psychological disturbance, if you are confused, if you've been badly wounded by another person and you go on to commit a series of actions, those diminish the guilt. And so what people are calling mortal sin, I don't know how they think they can determine that for another human being. One of the happiest moments for me was when I heard the Holy Father say about sin, or a person or a group of people. He said, "Who am I to judge?" And I thought, well, now there it is. No human being can judge. So hearing the Holy Father acknowledge that no human being is equipped to fully judge another human being filled me with elation. And I thought to myself, a Christian approach would be sincere interest in the wounds of another, in the pain of another, in the anguish of other people, and not their sins. I mean, this obsession with, it's like we're trying to smack people with the mortal sin stick, and it's the wrong thing to do. It's not Christian. I feel like if the church were a courtroom, and we must remember always that it's not. There is one judge only. But if it were a courtroom, it would be a courtroom with 99 prosecutors and 1 defense attorney. And I would ask you to consider, which would the Lord be? Which would the Lord be? I think he would be a defense attorney, because only Jesus understands everyone's full story. It's very easy to judge, but it's very immature to think that we can. All we can do is acknowledge that something is a grave matter. And then we must ask ourselves, why is a person involved in committing actions that are seriously wrong? And be interested in their pain. I would like to, each of us, to think back through our lives in terms of the judging. And maybe 10 years ago, you experienced an adverse event in your life, something that caused you pain or grief, or even just somebody dying. Life is difficult. And they talk about children experiencing adverse childhood experiences, and we know now so much more than we did in the past. If you are experiencing an adverse childhood experience, something that's painful for you, you are going into adulthood with some difficulties. And where will they take you? Where have they taken you? So let's look back at our past. Now, maybe you had a period where you were in pain and anguish, and maybe you judged yourself very harshly during that period, but maybe you went on to mature, and in looking back at the less developed you understand yourself, and you feel compassion for yourself. Now, isn't this probably, hopefully this is true for all of us, and what I would say to you is, how much more compassion does Jesus feel for you than you can feel for yourself? Because at that time of your anguish, he understood you. Now, we must learn to extend that same compassion to everybody, and then we will be who we are supposed to be and what we are supposed to be as a faith community. I'm so excited by what the Holy Father is saying and what he is doing. And what it seems to me, some people would say that they find the Holy Father confusing. My friends, I would suggest to you that it's not the Holy Father they find confusing and what he's actually saying. I think that they're not, that they're confused by what other people are saying about what the Holy Father is saying. And I think that's the real issue. If we're trolling the internet to find scandal and excitement, we aren't becoming saints. Jesus doesn't need us to do that. That's not going to help you. I get this feeling like there's this a phenomenon taking place that is almost like politics. Like, the Holy Father is like a candidate or something. And then there's a different position taken up in the church, and like there's an attitude of we get to pick. My friends, that's just not available to us. That's simply not available to you. You don't get to pick. You don't get to join a faction against the Holy Father and call it Catholic, because actually it's not. And this, I guess it's always going to be that way, but it's not for you. It's not for you. Just don't look, don't spectate. We can choose. What we should be worried about is representing the Lord's enormous love and compassion to everybody around us. That's what we should be trying to. If you want to become a saint, that should be interesting and exciting to you. Look at everything you're doing right and do more of it, and you will advance into virtue. When you hear people talking about sins, obsessed with the sins of others, smacking people with the mortal sin stick, I would find myself a different group. And I would find myself a group of people who are taking care of those in need, who are making cases for groups of people who are suffering, specific sufferings or anguishes. I would like, did anyone knock on doors and tell everybody, look, missing Sunday Mass can be a serious matter if you're deliberately trying to separate yourself from God. But if you have social anxiety, if you just were running late, if there's a lot of stress in your life and you couldn't get there, if you couldn't simply get your children all dressed on time at the same time and keep them dressed enough to get to, you know what I mean? We're looking for a pattern of participation in Sunday Mass, and we're looking for the willingness to be present in the community of believers. That's what we're aiming for. It's not missing Sunday Mass equals a mortal sin. Can it? Well, it can. I've asked people, and I've said, how can missing Sunday Mass elevate to a mortal sin? And I can tell you, there are people who are equipped to make a case for it. But it gets into such a ridiculous place very quickly. Like, missing Sunday Mass could be a mortal sin if you decided, I'm going to follow Satan instead. Crazy, crazy. Not for you and I. Let's get to Mass as best we can. Let's try to bring God's love to the people in our families, the people around us. And let's not forget that the church is not a political party. There is one Pope. People will say, oh, I'm a Pope John Paul II fan, or I'm a Pope Benedict fan. And what I can tell you is this: Pope John Paul II from heaven and Pope Benedict from earth are Pope Francis fans. We are called to be unified with our Holy Father. We are called to contemplate deeply and personally the direction he's pointing in, which gives me such great joy. One of the best things that ever happened to me was to hear the Holy Father say, mothers, feed your babies. To me, that one statement did more to push back at a culture of pornography than anything else I had heard. Because what he was saying was, a woman breastfeeding her infant is as holy as anything else that takes place in our Christian organizations. And it takes away this idea that the objectification of a woman's body. Something sacred is happening when a woman feeds her baby. And we need to be teaching that. We need to be teaching that. And when he pointed to it, it filled me with absolute joy. Now, my friends, if you're a Catholic, if you were ever a Catholic, if you were baptized a Catholic 100 years ago, I would invite you to find your nearest Eucharistic Adoration Chapel. Go in, sit down. We believe that Jesus Christ is uniquely present in the host, and he is there. And then you can look at Jesus and he can contemplate you, and that is the whole thing right there. The church exists to serve what is already your relationship with God. That's always there for you. No one can take it away. It will never change. You and God are in relationship. So if you can go and sit in an adoration chapel and let God be with you, he will love you. He will persuade you that you are welcome. So my friends, if you're one of those people who worries about your past, maybe it's time to stop. The Lord views you as someone full of potential and rich with hope, someone who is an asset to him on the earth. Remember that St. Paul stated, where sin is present, grace abounds even more. And I would say that to each one of you. And now I want to close this with a statement that our Holy Father made, to quote him, because this is an instruction to you and I. The church must be a place of mercy, freely given, where everyone can feel welcomed, loved, forgiven, and encouraged to live the good life of the gospel. That's your job. That's my job. That's our job, to create a church where that is present. To remember, a short way to become a saint: look at everything you're doing right and do more of it. Those good actions will crowd out the bad, and you will be amazing. God bless you.